Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special budget committee of the whole meeting, March the 25th, 2025. It is 8:30 and the chair calls this meeting to order. Mayor McKay, would you like to read the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to acknowledge Wolfville is situated in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and as such, ask that we conduct our business with the 7 sacred teachings in mind: truth, honesty, love, courage, respect, wisdom, and humility.
Thank you, Mayor McKay. And can I ask for an approval for the agenda as circulated?
So moved.
Can you- Councillor Elliott, and will you be able to read that, please?
I move that council approve the agenda as it's been circulated and or amended.
Thank you, and I can have a seconder for that?
I'll
Thank you.
second that. Oh, sorry.
Oh. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried. And this on to number 2, declarations of conflict of interest. If there's anyone that wishes to declare, please do so now. Seeing none, we will move on. Well, we're already at public input. Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to come up to the podium and speak? 2 public inputs? No. Yes. Oh, there is? Okay. Sorry. Yes, there is a public input at the end. Yep. Okay. And Laura, is there anyone online?
No.
No. Okay. That was quick. And we will move on over to, looks like Director Hopkins is already seated and ready to go. So I will look to her to start off. Excuse me. Can everyone hear me? So this morning, we're going to go through the draft budget and operations plan, which is the second version that council has seen. There have been a number of changes, nothing overly significant, but we're going to focus on a few goals today to get through where we have seen changes from version 1 to version 2. We'll look at both the operating and the capital budget for the town. We'll identify the changes that are present in version 2 versus what was in version 1. There were some follow-up questions that I believe council had from the March 11th special cow. That's included in the RFD document. We can review that if there's questions later on. And then we'll review the water utility. This is my second year presenting budgets. Last year, there was no change to the water utility from the first version to the final version. This year, there actually are a couple changes, both in the capital component of the budget as well as 2 changes in the operating budget. Version 1, we had presented to council, and thanks to Glenn and Jenny, had presented to council version 1 back on the 11th of March, showing that we had a surplus of $58,448. In preparing the iteration for version 2, we are now balanced. And if you've had an opportunity to go through the RFD document with the full financial package, you'll note that there have been a number of changes from version 1 to version 2. And we did have a surplus balance, and I'll explain it as we go through this particular document and what we've done with the surplus within the operating budget. Overall, the operating budget, it's $6.4 million, which is top line revenue. And we have the ability, council has the ability to direct staff on how to execute those expenditures for those tax dollars. This might be a little bit small. You may want to refer to your package. This is the operating budget, statement of operations, income statement, profit and loss statement, a number of different names it has. And what it actually shows you is it's not the full operating budget. It's only the operating budget with lines or categories that had changes from version 1 to version 2. So we'll In the coming slides, we'll go through any of those variances that are greater than $10,000. If you want to back me up at any time and go through another variance that was less than the $10,000, by all means, I'm happy to do so. The information is also contained in the RFD package. So overall, our revenues have changed by $162,000. We were initially at a budget of 16.6 million. We're now at a budget of $16.4 million. Two categories of revenues have changed: sales of service and cost recoveries, in addition to provincial, federal, and other grants. Sorry, I didn't get the grants on the last little part. I see gran, but I should say grants on that second line underneath revenues. On the expenditure side, we have a number of category expenditures which have been nuanced to either they've got a new estimate, a more accurate or an actual number that we've received from insurance or from our partners, or et cetera, that documents what changes we've actually made to the budget. Overall, the net surplus has actually decreased by $113,000. And our net surplus is now at zero. You'll notice that under capital programs, reserves, and transfer from operating reserve, there's a new amount. There was no amount in version 1. In version 2, there's $55,271, which will be transferred from the operating reserve in order to fund some of the additional programs that council has asked staff to include in the budget. When we look at the revenues and the change in the dollar value from the sales and service cost recoveries, we had three components that made up that change. The first component, overall, was an $89,000 decrease in revenues. The first component of that is a dividend that would normally come to the town from the water utility. That dividend is only payable to the town if the water utility is seeing a surplus. The budget for the water utility does not have a sufficient surplus in order to cover that dividend, so that dividend had to be removed. Secondarily, there were interest revenues earned on outstanding accounts, so outstanding water bills, outstanding tax accounts. We've reduced that from 65,000 to 50,000 for the year. We felt that given what had actually occurred in 2024-25, that was a closer estimate to what we felt could happen in 25-26, unless our accounts go berserk and we have a lot more arrears, which we're not planning on that. The last one is the King's Fire Protection. That's a reduction in revenue as well. And we'll see that later on as we get through the rest of the operating statement. In provincial, federal, and other grants, there's simply a reduction in the Housing Accelerator Fund grant. And it's not the fact that we're not getting those monies. It's simply the matter of we're not expending the full grant monies that we're able to spend. So the grant monies per year for 4 years is $456,900. In 25-26, we're only planning on spending about $385,000, $384,400. So that $72,600 will go into a reserve to be spent in either year 3 or year 4 for Housing Accelerator Fund. Any surplus that's left in 24-25, the same type of treatment, accounting treatment, will happen as well. Overall, the change in revenues is $162,000 decrease from version 1. Any questions so far?
Councillor Williams?
The Housing Accelerator Fund was mentioned on the news last night, I think. The Conservatives are wondering whether to get rid of it. So to what extent would that impact on us? Would we be left with trying to scrabble for money should it not come from the feds?
Good question. It depends on whether or not, and I'm going to defer to Devin. He can add to the answer as well. The monies that the town has already received, I'd be very dubious that they'd be asking to claw that money back. It would be for future monies, which have not yet been spent. So we would simply have to readjust our planned expenditures and programs that we may have in place from this current year going into 25-26. Devin, did you want to add to that?
We've provided a bit of information through PAC and council on this before, because the question has come up in public setting. We had the question. But the biggest risk, just to reiterate some of that we sent you before, is around staffing. And so we do have a staff person funded through that. The rest of the program doesn't have a lot of risk. And as Director Hopkins mentioned, we already have funds that we do have planned expenditures on, but we'll see year 3 and 4 might be when we're really looking at what we may or may not be doing.
As we move on, the next component of the operating budget is our expenditures. I wanted to make note in your RFD package on salaries and wages, the increase and decrease are actually misworded. They're the opposite of what, so this presentation is correct on the RFD. It actually shows that the RCMP detachment went up, Public Works went down. It just shows, or excuse me, it went down and Public Works went up, and it's the opposite. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. If you're comparing this to the RFD, this is the correct version. So salary and wages, we saw a decrease in salary and wages. There's an increase through the policing department. And that's simply a matter of there was a detachment assistant who is retiring in June, I believe. That position will now be, it was part of our RCMP contracted services. It has been removed for 25-26, and now the town will be paying for that particular position. That's the addition of the 49,456, and that's prorated for the time that we believe that position will be filled. Secondarily, Public Works, we have vacancies coming up. That's all burn holes into Alex. Just kidding, Alex. But it's good for budget. So we do have a couple vacancies. One with, unfortunately, the Director of Public Works and Engineering will be leaving us next month. We'll all miss him greatly. In addition, we also have a vacancy for the project manager position. So that's an estimated proration as far as when we feel those positions will be filled in 25-26. But there should be a cost savings of about $90,000. Second to that, we have employee benefits. They actually went up, which you would think it would be the opposite given salaries and wages went down. We had some changes within the benefits. There was one employee missed in IT, which attributed to an increase of 22,600. The RCMP assistant, which I spoke about just in salary and wages, the benefits for that individual now become part of the town's expenditures. And again, they're removed from contracted services. And then the public work vacancies, which I just spoke about concerning the project manager and the director. Some other changes, and again, I'm going to just note, when you're looking at your package, the presentation, I'm just going through anything that has a variance of greater than $10,000. So if there's something that is brought to your attention, it may have a significant change, but it may not be over that $10,000 threshold. By all means, please ask questions once we finish going through the expense component of the presentation. Vehicle fuel, we had a decrease in what the anticipated amount would be for roads and for the Department for Roads and Streets of $16,250. Operational equipment and supplies, we had, some ins and outs between, oops, that's not the right amount. Operational equipment and supplies, it's actually, there should be more in that particular. There's a few departments missing there. So operational equipment and supplies, we had a decrease of 61,702. Component, it was made up from IT, went down by $1,220. Bylaw went down by 1,000. Fire went down by 14,000. And fire was, this is not on the presentation, my apologies, it's in the RFD. That's just a typo on my part. That we had to realign some of the expenditures within fire services in order to meet the IMSA agreement with Kings County, so that the amount of increase was within the threshold of that particular agreement. Roads and streets, they've gone down by about $40,000 in supplies. Traffic services is down $12,420. And then parks is up slightly by $7,033. Again, I apologize, it's not on that particular slide, and it should be. The next change was with program expenditures, and this, I think, was discussed a little bit more at length in the first presentation and back in March, on March the 11th. We've got $121,000 added to programs, projects and program expenditures. Largest component of that is with Housing Accelerator Fund. We've got three items that, there's an engagement project, there's a placemaking project, and standards and specifications for the town infrastructure project. So about $117,000 will be going between planning and public works under the Housing Accelerator Fund. Secondarily to that, there's an additional $4,000 under Department Festival and Events, and that's $4,000 for a volunteer event, which was added from version 1 to version 2. Is everybody okay? Operations, equipment and supplies, it's in your package. If there's questions to it, please. Again, I apologize that it's not on that slide. Contracted services, we had changes in contract services as well. We had quite a decrease. A small amount in IT, and that's just us reviewing with David, the IT manager, what should go in contracted services, and we had a good turnout there for $2,150. The largest component is within policing, so that's the RCMP policing component. Of that, almost $82,000 is related to the detachment assistant. So that would be their salary, wages, their benefits, any pension component, overtime, etc. In addition to that, I had estimated very aggressively on version 1 because I was fearful of what it might actually come in. Since then, the RCMP budget has come in lesser than what was anticipated. So we have about $110,000 savings with their budgeted contract based on the new service agreement that we have with the RCMP that was changed in 24-25. We have a slight increase in contracted services through the fire department, a larger increase in public works of 41,510, and a large increase again from the Housing Accelerator Fund of about $100,000. Contracted services are services that we don't have the capacity within the staffing to do, or we perhaps may not have the expertise, and hence we will enter into service and or other material agreements with a third party. Then we have the final transfer from operating reserves. This is the 55,271 that's on the very bottom of the operating budget or the P&L. What that's made up of, there were 3 asks of council this year to put in the budget. One was a one-time capital funding for the Wolfville Legion of $40,000. Second to that, in 24-25, Devour had been provided an extension on their second draw from their grant of capital of $50,000. Then we have Horton High, who's made a one-time operating request for the Duke of Edinburgh for $2,500, and the net of that was netted against a slight surplus of $37,229. Overall, that brings us to an operating transfer of $55,271. So we're using operating funds to fund those additional requests, but we had some surplus that we're able to offset. So far, so good. Everyone's quiet. The next. What's that? I'm taking it. I'm just running with it. I think we'll be out of here. Like, I don't think I'm going to need as many hours as we may have dedicated to that. So the next one is tax rates. This is just a copy. I think we may have already had this in the first presentation. If it wasn't in the first presentation, I think it might have been in the January COW. So within this budget, the assumption that we have for tax rates are to hold the tax rates for both residential and commercial. So last year and this year, residential is $1.4655 per $100 of assessed property value. Commercial is $3.5655. So $1.47 and $3.56 or $3.57 roughly is what individuals will be paying and commercial properties will be paying on their taxes based on their assessments for 25-26. Of the assessments, you'll see in the box on the lower part of the page of the slide what the residential, commercial, and resource assessed values are and where we'll be getting the tax value, the tax dollars from that. So we have residential saw a 7.8% increase year over year from 24-25 up to $633 million. Commercial went down ever so slightly by about $420,000. Resource, it also went down, and that was simply a reclassification between resource and residential. So we had a couple agricultural properties that were sold and became residentially categorized. The next are other rates and fees for 25-26. This would have been part of the reason why you would have seen a secondary document in your RFD for the fire protection. Fire protection rate actually is increasing year over year. This current year, it's 5.55 cents per $100 of assessment. In 25-26, it's budgeted to increase to $5, 5 cents, and 5.62 cents per $100. And that's because we've got about a $27,000 increase in our fire protection services year over year. Business development area rate remains unchanged. It's at 23 cents per 100. Then we get down into the sewer fees. Sewer fees remain unchanged year over year, but when we get to the municipal fee policy, there is an amendment because there were a couple errors in the policy from last year. So sewer rates will stay at $7.08 per 100 gallons. The flat rate on a quarterly basis for residential sewer assessments, will be at $135.70 per quarter. The minimum quarterly charge on metered households will be the $29.85. And then we've got our sewer water and sewer water connection fees all at $6,500. This is a slide showing the new strategic partnerships, which will be granted for a new 4-year term if this budget is approved. You'll note that version 1 had the participants for the prior 4-year term. Version 2 has the new participants, and I believe all participants that applied have been given some amount of funding. Overall, year over year, the change is a savings of $5,000. Principally, the savings is within the Wolfville Historical Society. We had been giving $10,000 a year, and that's been reduced to $5,000. We have 2 new applicants, one being Stage Profits, and they were given a $3,000 strategic partnership grant for the years 25-20 to 29. From 2025 to 2029. In addition, Front Street Community Evan is another new applicant, and it's proposed to give them $4,000 a year for the 4-year term as well. So this particular amount, coupled with this next slide, when you look at your operating statement, will make up the $208,850. So the $46,850 in version 2 under column version V2 2025 to 2029 is for $46,850. Add that to the 162 version 2 column again, it'll actually give you the $208,850.
Excuse me, can Councillor Elliott, can she interrupt
Yes,
and
of
ask a
course.
question? Thank you.
Show me back the slide up.
Yeah. It's a question about the Historical Society and why the decrease by half. I don't remember us discussing that. The $10,000 has been a standard since my first term on council. So I just wondered what happened there.
My understanding, and I'm going to perhaps ask Nick to step in. So funding had been proposed, and I believe it was a separate RFD.
There's another budget line. So the 5,000 is the max that we can actually give under the policy for the strategic partnership program. And there's a separate $5,000 that's given under the I think it's the museum budget line. There's another budget area. So they should still be getting 10,000 total.
It's under another department.
Very reassuring, Nick. Thank you.
It doesn't fall under this particular categorization is I guess what we're saying. Community partnership grants, the total for this year is proposed to be $162,000. The largest change in that is, the Acadia pool. We had been giving, $75,000, last year. Version one, we had taken that money out because the pool was closing, in June. Normally, the funds for the pool were paid late in the fiscal year in February or March. And then we have the normal standard contributions with Acadia for the athletics complex, for students' bursaries for the summer programs, and then for major events. In addition to that, we've got $12,000 in festival and recreational programs. I think there's two programs for that. I think they're both $6,000 a piece. The Apple Blossom Festival. Then we also have for non-strategic grants, an additional $2,000 for the Apple Blossom. I believe that's not the booster, it's something that's local that the town puts on. The one-time capital grant for Devour, and then there's an additional $5,000 allowance, which makes up that difference for the Historical Society.
Beth, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You said $75,000 for the pool, so I thought it was specifically 60 for the pool. Can you just explain that?
Yeah,
Because
so
that's,
last year when Acadia came, they had asked for a change within the funding. Athletics was originally at 50,000, the pool was at 60. They had asked for a change in funding to 75 for the pool and 35 for athletics. So that's what was approved in 24-25, and it simply carried forward into 25-26. And that's the difference in the funding. For years, I believe it was $60,000, and it
I
wasn't.
think it started at 75 when they first came and asked, and then it went to 60. And so last year it was 75. I just want to be clear on that. So it's 75. Okay.
And I have a question too. We got a letter from Caroline, and she asked about whether that sum could be deflected to some recreational pool usage at other pools. I don't know if that's been discussed or not, but I thought it was worth a question.
So we have, at this point in time, to take that sum and allocate it to an undefined project probably isn't the best use of that budget room. But what we are doing is actively listening to the community to understand what the gap is with the pool closure. And then through that kind of two-way discussion, if there are gaps identified, then we do have enough room in our budget to potentially look at some offsets. At the end of the day, as we said in the first round of the budget discussion, our issue with recreation program delivery isn't necessarily a budget issue, it's a capacity issue. So even if we had more money, there's only a limit to what we can actually provide in terms of recreational programming. The other two pieces that I'll mention is that if gaps come forward from the community, the provincial government has also stated very openly that they are willing to commit some level of funding as well. So I would suggest that we get the best distance out of provincial funding before looking at municipal funding with whatever might come forward. And we are also putting our focus on the medium to long-term plan of a regional recreation center, which is really the direction of our focus over the next year or so, is working with our partners to determine if a regional recreation center for Kings County is going to move forward.
And please keep in mind, even once the budget, if the budget were to be approved by council, there's still iterations through other components that can be brought to council throughout the year, should these programs or should new initiatives be created. This is kind of a snapshot in time with a plan for the next 12 months. This is other projects. We had so again, this is part of your P&L or your operating statement. Other projects in version one was listed at $271,750. Version two, it's at $392,750. The largest component, there's two components of change from version one to version two. One is the addition of the volunteer event for $4,000. And secondarily to that is the housing accelerated projects that I listed earlier between engagement, placemaking, and standardization and specs for the town infrastructure. I know this is something council likes to see and wants to know kind of where the money's going, and when they can talk, when they speak to constituents, they can talk freely about this. Hence why we present it pretty much every time that we come to Cal. Now we're talking capital. So the capital budget last year changed several times. This year, it was pretty static. Version 2 certainly does see an increase from over version 1. We're at 118 in version 1. We're at 9,275,000. Overall, the difference is $156,000, $156,200. Not a huge significant change, but we're going to take you through where the changes are. This is a normal presentation. It simply shows the area of concentration that those capital dollars are to be spent in, broken down by various categories: information technology, municipal buildings, which you see nothing in year 1, protective services, that's your fire services principally, transportation services, that's public works, environment health services, that's your sewer and waste treatment, and then community infrastructure is going to be everything outside, recreational, your trails, etc. Overall, again, council's being asked to approve only year 1. The presentation does have 5 years, which we normally put in the capital budget. My predecessor, Director McLean, was always putting in 10 years, which was a really good approach. The problem that as we got into forecasting some of these capital projects, with the change in estimates, with the change in longevity as far as knowing what we're going to do in years 6 to 10, we felt that the estimates were not necessarily accurate enough to be presenting to council. However, we do see the importance of ensuring that we still ensure that we have the reserves there, that we're still watching our ratios, our debt service ratio, et cetera, to make sure that our funding is appropriate in order to keep the sustainability of the town and the projects that the town requires for its infrastructure and services. Overall, for the 5 years presented, the budget's almost $44 million within years 1 through year 5 being 2029 to 2030. Within year 3, you'll note a large $13,772,000. That is where we've currently have the fire hall and the town library. Just if someone wants to know why that amount looks so large, that's why. Question?
Why does the community infrastructure budget decrease year after year?
It depends on, from my experience, what I've seen is it depends on whether we have capacity to do something with, be it the rec center, be it with trails, if we have funding. That's actually a little bit harder to plan. So in year 1, we're going to budget what we know we can do. We may elapse into multiple years, so it could go into year 2. Year 3, 4, and 5, we're planning to put place markers, but we might not know exactly what we're going to execute. So so say for instance, we've got flood mitigation for the waterfront and some beautification there. We've had $275,000 now for 2 years that I've been here. We weren't able to execute in this year, it carries forward into the next year. So it's almost, there's place cards. There's amounts that we know we have to maintain in order to keep updated, but we're not necessarily saying we're going to work on this park or we're going to work on that in year 5. We know what we're going to work on in year 1 and we build the capacity for it. We put it in our project charters within the operational plan, but we don't have that level of detail carried forward into years 2 through 5. It's really difficult, like when you create the budget and senior leadership comes together and we plan on what we feel we can execute or what we need to complete execution that has started in the current year. We sometimes don't have that lens that can go beyond, a 12 or 18-month period. We simply know that we need to invest in our roads and our streets. We need to invest in our infrastructure, but we may not have the exact project that's going to be in place in that particular future year. It's
Okay.
it's not the best answer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It just, when you're looking at it top level like this, without having that understanding, it kind of looks like there's a lack of investment in that area. And it's not to say that we won't be doing great, wonderful things, but
Right.
the appearance on the budget.
And it's in year 2 and year 3 you're speaking of specifically. Like year 3, it's half of what it is
Yeah,
in year 1.
it looks like we're moving further away
Doing
from
less work.
doing less work from something that we talk about being a priority. So that's all, I guess.
Yeah, I think staff can certainly take back council's comments and as we move forward into this fiscal year and start our budgeting for the following, we can do a more in-depth look at what projects can span within multiple years and what project council would like to see within the term that council's here and for future.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about not being able to execute because of capacity and whatnot, perhaps there's a conversation where we could look at, okay, well, if we want to increase our capacity by year 3 or year 4 to be able to do more, what would that look like from a budget perspective?
Mhm. I think when it comes to capacity, it's not necessarily, so these capital projects, normally they're third-party capital projects. So we're creating a tender for a contractor to execute. If it's in-house, it would be in the operating plan, but it would be within the departmental expenditures for operational expenditures.
Mhm.
These are capital expenditures that oftentimes we have to go to a third party and we would have to tender out. Capacity doesn't just lie within the staffing, it also lies within what contractors are going to bid. Sometimes we've had contractors bid on jobs with the anticipation we're going to get multiple bids and we get one bid and it's
Yeah,
out of what we had even planned on it being.
okay,
So there's some procuring supply chain issues as well.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this particular slide?
Can I make a comment on that as well?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it does look odd. I also think it's because it's our first year and we haven't done our strategic planning yet and we haven't said what else we would like in that, so it looks less than what right now we would like to see in it. So I think once we get through our strategic planning and we have a discussion and say, because that's some of the things that are in there have been in there for a few years, or at least a couple. And so once we get to say, these are the things we'd like to see, we can implement those into the budget for the next 3 years that we'd like to see come to our fruition in our term.
And because we're only today looking at year 1.
Right.
When we have that discussion, we can come back and move around.
Yes,
the other years.
And it will influence next year's budget
Okay,
and what
great.
you plan for over the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Make sense?
Any more questions? Council can also direct staff to, when you get your strategic plan, to your point, Mayor McKay, we can also look at what that means within future years. So we really didn't spend a great deal of time to determine what we feel we can execute in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are amounts that pretty much were carried forward from previous budget years. If you look at environmental health services as well, year 4 and 5, we have nothing budgeted, which we have to have something budgeted. We're having the new waste treatment plant, but there's still going to be ancillary costs that are going to follow through after that, is my expectation. So this is something that, again, when you start doing multiple year and you're doing future years, you really have to have a really concerted effort in order to get those dollar values to be true and more exacting so that you can stand on them when you're presenting in front of council or you're speaking to your constituents. Right now, those amounts are really good estimates, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly what we're going to do. There'll be reiterations from now until we hit year 5. And they should be ongoing. Capital planning is, a living exercise. It's something that, given what happens within the town and the services and program that the town offers, if we have a 100-year storm, if we have other types of emergency or disasters, or other infrastructure needs, council is required to shift. Staff are required to shift based on council's wishes.
Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring this up, but it is kind of a capital item. When I was looking over the agenda, I didn't see a line item for the upgrade at the Roby Tufts Park of the chimney. And I don't know if that's included in somewhere else, but I thought we talked about it after Riel Boyd was presenting, and I'm not sure if that's in there or not.
It is not. So I'll let Alex answer in more detail. But after following that presentation, we invited the presenter to come and do a visual inspection with our staff of the chimney. I'll let Alex add any more detail than that.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, we invited her to come up and have a look at the chimney and make some recommendations. That meeting hasn't happened yet, so there is no project planned at this time.
This feels like a good opportunity to also add and connect some dots with our operations plan. So you'll notice in our operational plan, we've got a couple of interrelated projects that we're working on through the year at the staff level. One of them is around our capital planning, acknowledging that, as Mayor McKay said, this council hasn't really had an opportunity to put their stamp on our capital planning, but also looking at how we do capital planning and whether or not all of the considerations and inputs that we want as a town to have considered are part of that mix. So we'll be looking at that over the course of the next year. As well, an important part of capital planning isn't just what you're spending, but also what you're bringing in order to support that capital spend. So we've got an item in our operations plan this year to do to bolster our revenue projections and our cash flow projections multi-year, so that we know what we actually have in terms of cash on hand in accounts to be able to spend versus having to go to get debt to fund some of these projects, and how then all of that mixes with each other. So when you know what you can actually spend, because we can only bring in so much money and we can only take on so much debt, that also influences where you put your capital and what you spend on. Because the money is not unlimited. There is a ceiling. There is a limit that we can responsibly spend. So those extra layers of decision making need to be applied on top of this as well. And I'll just note too, just for looking at community infrastructure built out, year 3 is relatively low for the reasons that Director Hopkins had mentioned. But if you look at the other projects that are occurring in year 3, that's actually our biggest spend year planned at this point in time. And capacity is part of the challenge there. This has already been described, but as is our ability to spend. Because we actually have to, whatever money we don't bring in to spend on those projects, we have to go out and we have to buy debt to be able to do that. So there's a lot of intermixing considerations that go into capital planning, and we really want to spend this year to engage with council through strategic planning and also in these meetings, and work at the staff level to really make sure that we've got the right details and the right considerations going into that plan as we build it out.
I think last year when I first presented one of the capital budgets, we talked a little bit with council about what the average spend was for capital projects. And we're certainly forecasting much higher spends than we had historically seen in previous years. We were spending between $2 and $4 million, and now we're budgeting. Last year, our budget was over $5 million. This year, it's, not over $9 million. So, I mean, we're certainly growing that. And so as we see more of the budget grow from the capital expenditure to CAO Horn's point, this is something that will have to be very finely looked at and forensically done through the accounting lens in order that we have the cash to spend and we're within the threshold as far as our debt service. All in all, it's really positive that we can even consider. If you think of some other municipalities, I think that the amount of that we're able to offer the area and actually project that we plan to execute is quite substantial, and I'm happy to be part of it and excited to see what actually happens in the next 2 to 3 years. Next slide. Any more questions on capital for the town? This goes through some of the new projects, the $156,000 that I mentioned. We had growth within the capital investment plan. Some of that's through information technology. The first line you'll see is $32,600. That's more or less an accounting preference. In prior years, we had some capital, what I would consider to be capital purchases enveloped within operations. So depending on what each organization may set their capital expenditure thresholds to be, most often our IT department buys in bulk, so David, will buy a number of laptops or a number of desktops. At one time, so we have an inventory should something happen versus the one-ofs. If we're purchasing a one at a time, we will expense that. If we're purchasing in bulk and we have a capital reserve, or excuse me, a capital inventory, I will call it, of hardware, I would like to see it on the capital budget. So for that reason, we've switched the accounting application from last year to this year to include that in our capital budget. Small housekeeping of $200 for the network access. It was 24,000, now it's 24,200. Fire services, again, a little bit of an accounting preference here. We've taken some of their expenditures out of their operating budget and capitalized them, principally for some three radios and better airbags as well. We already have some fire service equipment in there, which already covers their bunker gear. So they went from 60,000 to 73,400, version 1 over version 2. Version 2 over version 1, excuse me, I said that wrong. Flood mitigation, we originally had $75,000 for the waterfront flood mitigation. We've added an additional $75,000, and I believe that's in addition to doing some dike work as well as beautification around the waterfront. Lastly, the compost site, this was per council's direction to put this in the budget. So there's a $35,000 capital project plan in order to prep the compost site. So that would include lighting and signage and other prep work as far as, land grubbing and et cetera to get the site ready. So that encompasses the $156,000 increase version 2 over version 1 for the capital investment budget for the town. Any questions so far or any additional questions? This is simply just a visual on where we're going to be over the next 3 years. So in this slide, we have the budget focus years 1 through 3, which we have a more exacting lens of what we anticipate our capital projects to be. In this slide, I'm simply trying to demonstrate to council the largest component of where we feel or where that capital spend will be, potentially be in municipal buildings, which is your large orange segment to your right. Secondarily would be your transportation services to your left. Environment, health is blue at the top. And then protective services is the gray, the little gray pie slice on the bottom. You can see information technology is at the very top and community as well, but they're less than 1%, so they don't make a big slice of the pie. But just to give you the bulk of where the town's monies are planned to be invested, that kind of gives people a visual if it helps. Funding assumptions, very little has changed on the funding assumptions, but I'm just reiterating where the funding will come from for these capital jobs. I believe the only change within was for capital reserves and debt funding. There was a change for additional debt funding for the, I lost my train of thought. One of the projects for $300,000. I can't remember the name of it. My apologies. So there's a capital reserve funding increase. Aside from that, we're still using, we're going to be using debt funding of $1.6 million, our current capital reserve funding of $3.1 million. We've got some additional grant funding with the active transportation and the ISIP grant money in a total of just over $4 million. And then we have additional funding, which I believe is for trails and cost recovery for vehicles. This is a slide. We talked a little bit about reserves. I think in previous presentations, council may have been shown what the unrestricted reserves looked like. This is actually includes your unrestricted capital, your unrestricted operating, as well as your restricted capital reserves. On average, we're somewhere around the $7 million over the 5-year span, but you'll see in year 1 and year 2, we have a very healthy capital reserve. The green is your unrestricted capital. The pink or fuchsia color is your unrestricted operating, and then that green color, what do you call that, teal? That teal color would be your restricted capital. So on average, we've got about a little over $36 million over 5 years, and I've actually presented 6 years, which includes going into fiscal 30-31.
At risk of showing my ignorance, can you define the words unrestricted and restricted?
So restricted, I'll define restricted first, and that will help with the unrestricted. Restricted is if there is something that has been granted for particular usage. So if it's a project, for instance, the wastewater treatment plant, if the monies are granted for a particular project, we carry out that project, the funds are restricted only for that usage.
Right.
And we report back to, depending on the funding agency, whether it be the provincial or federal government on that. Unrestricted, that allows council the opportunity to determine what they would like those funds to be delegated for.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good question, very good question. So you can see, once we get into years 3 and year 4, we've got a little bit of play going on within the reserve funding. To CAO Horn's point, once we have the opportunity to do more involved cash forecasting and revenue analyzation, then we can start to identify, we can start to manipulate those columns, if I could be so bold to say that, but to actually be able to work on where the sweet spot is. You know, where we can actually plan. I mean, holding the reserves, which we've had healthy reserves for a number of years, obviously with the interest rates being higher, they're starting to drip. But we've been able to also earn revenue on those reserves. So we can use that money that we've been saving and earning on additional projects and different one-time funding, you know, grant funding and capital funding and that type of thing that council gets on a regular basis from local agencies. So this is just basically a depiction of where we are. You never see us go into any area of a negative funding situation. They certainly seem healthy, but you'll notice that between the unrestricted capital and the restricted capital, we kind of get a little bit of an ebb as far as it starts to go up, and then year 3, it kind of plummets into year 4 because we have plans that money will be utilized. That, for instance, would be for the active transportation. That should be fully utilized where it builds until we have the project completed. And the same with the wastewater treatment plant as well. Next, we're on to the water utility. We haven't spent a lot of time reviewing the water utility in some past presentations. Obviously, the water utility, the rates are set by the utility board. This is a carry forward function of those rates based on the anticipated consumption from our from Wolfville residents. There were 2 changes within the operating statement for the water utility. One being Alex and his team had put forward a proposal to do some cleaning and biofouling, excuse me. It's like biofueling, that's not right. Biofouling of the well, removal. So instead of doing, we had a debate and decided. So currently, if you look down at the very bottom, version 1, we were in a deficit of $75,000. Version 2, we're at a deficit of $180, almost $84,000. That additional $107,000 change comes from production well number 2, which is at Wickwire. The cost of that well being cleaned is $104,400. I know. We actually had 2 quotes, and in combination, they were $225,000. Oh, excuse me, $215,000. For both. we're only anticipating executing one next year, and we will hopefully have a rate study completed before we can then work to completing the second well. It's a lot of money. The secondary change, you'll also see in administration in general, that $3,500 is a reiteration of the actual insurance cost for water utility, because we've received our renewal from our broker. So we know the true value of what our insurance is going to cost us. So there was a slight increase as well for water utility. Overall, $107,961 for the water utility and additional expenditures. Fortunately, we have a surplus that we'll be working off of. So we have $345,000 that 183 will come off of, which will deplete some of the surplus. So going into future years, obviously there'll have to be a rate change in order for us to maintain, either a balanced budget or within a level range, which puts us, closer to a positive surplus. Next will be capital. Well,
Can I ask a question on that?
of course. Oops.
So maybe just for our and maybe the public's benefit, can you tell us what the words mean and the necessity of them? Because I don't know what did you say with bio? You said what?
Biofouling.
Thanks.
I'm gonna defer to director.
Good idea.
Sousa.
We don't even know the words.
It's the word.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so biofouling, I'm not a technical expert on it, but I can tell you what I know about it based on what I've been told by the technical experts. It's a phenomenon that occurs on the outside of your well screens over time. As well water is drawn through your well screens, certain items are filtered out through that water by the screens, and whatever is alive in the water that contributes to biofouling can tend to accumulate on what gets filtered out on the outside of those screens. So what the treatment does is it's a whole process. The first thing that has to happen is the entire well pump, motor, and riser pipe assembly has to be pulled out of the well by a very large crane, because it's about 100 feet tall. Has to be pulled out of the well, has to be laid down, has to be thoroughly inspected to make sure the condition matches your expectations. Make sure there's nothing going on with it that can be addressed while it's out, which of course will help the longevity of your pumping equipment. While the well assembly is out, the well contractor sends a probe down the well, a camera essentially that visually inspects the condition of your entire well casing and the screens from the inside. And at that time, they can make the determination of what treatment to use to address whatever biofouling and whatever issues may be occurring on your well screens. In some cases, the well screens will wear down over time, essentially like being sandblasted as particulate matter comes through the wells. It can be very abrasive. It can wear down the metal on your screens. So that visual inspection is very important to tell us what condition those well screens are in. The conservative guess, I suppose, is that there will be biofouling based on experience with similar wells in the valley. And the allowance that we've put in the budget will give us enough money for the contractor to deal with that. They have, there's a chemical compound that they put down in the well, and then there's mechanical means that remove the biofouling, and then the well is essentially redeveloped with air, and everything's pumped out and cleaned thoroughly, inspected again, and then the well is put back together. So that is sort of a layman's, I guess, explanation of.
That's enough. I appreciate ladies.
That's enough. No.
But I mean, I hope that also provides sufficient explanation of why it costs so much, because there are very few contractors who are certified and have the qualifications to do that type of work, the qualifications and experience. And where we only have 2 active source water wells supplying our entire system, we want to be sure it gets done right.
Thank you for that explanation of biofouling. I think you did a better job than you initially said that you knew. So thank you for that. My question would be, how often does that have to be done? And do you stagger the like the wells? There's the Wickwire one's being done now, and is the other one being done? And how often does it have to be done?
That's a great question. There is no prescribed number of years how often it has to be done. I suppose the current condition of the wells, once they're assessed, will tell you to some degree, because I'm not actually sure when the last time it was done or if it has ever been done. But that well has been in service since 2007, and some estimation of time might be able to be derived from that. Essentially, you have to do it and then do it again after a certain amount of time to see if you're doing it too often or not often enough. So this is kind of, we're kind of at the first step here. The Wickwire well is planned to be done this coming fiscal year. The Cherry Lane well will be done in a future fiscal year, whether that's the year after or beyond. As Beth indicated, we have to take another look at the water rates to make sure all that work can be properly funded.
I have a question for Alex. So what will, when that well is out of service, depending on just the secondary well that we have, where we have 2 production wells, will that cause any supply demand issue for the town water?
My advice would be to issue a water conservation advisory during that time to keep the system demands as low as possible. Of course, during a water conservation advisory, the splash pad is not open, which is one of the biggest consumers of our drinking water. So I've indicated to the contractor that I'd like this work done during the time frame when the splash pad is not usually open. So either before or after.
Summer months.
That's right. And if we do it before the splash pad is open, there's a narrow window of time when the students have left Acadia before the splash pad is open, where our system demand is at the lowest. So that's, the months of May and up to the beginning of June.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, so so that is our operating budget. Yeah, we're going quite quickly, so.
And that timing would be very, very soon.
It would be
May.
very, very soon,
Right?
correct?
I know.
How long would the project take?
I've been told by our hydrogeologist that the process takes about a week, maybe 2 weeks at the longest for the well. It depends on what they find when they remove the equipment. If something has to be serviced, if the pump, for example, needs new seals or something like that, just to throw something out there, we do have a spare motor and pump assembly that can be swapped into service, so we can send that pump assembly out for proper servicing and rebuild. But I wouldn't expect it to take longer than, a couple weeks at the most. Provided the contractor shows up when they say they're going to show up, which has been a challenge.
You ready? This, I think I'd already touched upon the slide. In this graphical slide here, where it shows the P&L for the water utility. Again, just going through the power and pumping, the increase of the 104,000, and then the administrative cost increase for insurance of 34.98. Oh, then there's a couple little other items. Transmission distribution, there was $20 increase and a $43 increase in principal debenture repayments. Most of that's just rounding. The $20 was a slight increase on a particular staff member who had a revised certification, and this is prorated into the year. It's not significant, but I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. It's not like there's $1 million going one way, 999,980 going the other. It's literally just $20 and $43 rounding. That was what one of my accounting professors always used to say. Well, it doesn't matter if it's Could be this way. No. Anyhow, long story. Water utility capital budget. We had a capital budget presentation back in January. I think it was the first time that council would have seen what the anticipated plan was for the water utility. At that time, we had about $2.3 million planned. There was a duplication in that particular presentation of one of the transmission lines to the waste treatment plant for $560,000. It reduced to the version that you saw on March the 11th. Then we have a slight increase from the version 1 on March the 11th to the version 2 today on the 25th of March. So there's an addition for the SCADA assessment and planning study of $12,500. So just to kind of, if you've got the documents in front of you and you're looking to see where those changes are, this is kind of stepping you through. You've seen it 3 times. This is where those changes are for both, for all 3 iterations. We're nearing the end, just, I don't have many slides left, so if you have questions. The next slide identifies where the funding will come from for the water utility. We have $514,000 coming from the municipal capital growth program. We have 293 coming from the new grid or growth and renewal infrastructure development program. We have an operating reserve, which is sharing half of the SCADA assessment and study costs. We have $703,000 coming from funding from capital reserves, and we have $230,000 for long-term debt or debentures, totaling our capital funding for the water utility of $1,746,600. So this is my last slide. I can talk really slow. I think something that maybe we haven't had the opportunity to talk about are, we've talked in the past, you know, what does council want to see in the budget? I think perhaps that we can have some conversation, and I know we've had a couple, oh dear. One of the councilors popped their head in my office. Councilor Palmer popped his head in my office yesterday, and he said, "What about those U.S. tariffs?" And I said, "Very good question."
Yeah.
You know, we know there's going to be additional challenges within the fiscal year. There always are, whether it be a storm, whether it be staffing, whether it be, you know, COVID. A number of things could happen that we may not have yet identified or may not have planned in the budget. We have to remain flexible. We have to remain pliable so that we can actually react to those incidents when they happen. Obviously, we know with President Trump in place and the U.S. tariffs that have been put in place, there will be some future procurement impact to the town. I know there have been emails circulating and conversations as far as, you know, how do we procure? We're trying to procure as much as we can from Canadian suppliers. You know, one that comes to mind is the fire services and, you know, sending out an RFP for pricing of a new aerial ladder and what's going to happen with the pumper ladder that's coming in. Obviously, the expectation is that when staff do any kind of tendering, that the expectation is that there's a longer period of pricing reserves so that we have a guarantee on those prices. In addition, you know, it may come back to council that some of those decisions may not be approved because of the additional costs with those taxes that are being added from the US. I think the greatest impact will be on operational supplies and equipment, and naturally on capital projects as well. To Councillor Van Eeker's comment earlier about community infrastructure, the next one, fiscal sustainability and multi-year planning. This kind of plays into your question as far as once you get your strategic plan completed, where are we going to go and how much are we going to dive into that, and where can we actually determine what we can execute. So this is something that council, I hope, has, and I know they do have in their, you know, in their minds going forward as far as what that's going to look like for the town, and keeping in mind that this is year 1 iteration of the budget. It doesn't mean that there won't be changes throughout the year that will come back to council. And then my last question or my last note is, which, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, what are there other unidentified risks? You know, those are things that we all have to kind of be on the lookout for and communicate really well with our fellow team members, just to see if there's things that we can veer off before they actually hit the town, or at least veer off to a point that the impact is, we're pretty resilient and has negatively felt, or repercussions that, could impact Wolfville. The next slide's just a pretty picture. So thank you for allowing me to present the budget for the town and, water utility for 25-26. If there's questions or if there's a slide you want me to go back to, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, Councillor Butler.
I do. Hi. Hi. Thank you very much. Can you scoot back 2
Absolutely.
slides for me?
Whoops, oops. Did I do that, Laura?
Process of elimination. What's it?
The mouse just was so fluid. It went so quick.
Capital funding slide.
That really wanted to be done. She's like, "Close it out."
I was just like, thanks and good night.
Oh, she's got it, she's got it, she's coming. Okay, I'm gonna go very slow. Which capital, the, town?
Forward to.
It's the
One
third,
line, one line.
yeah, third slide to the last. 2 before your thank you.
Two before my thank you, right
2
here.
before the thank
Okay.
you, right there. So just because I've been reviewing the motion for the last little bit, our motion indicates a long-term debt funding of 514,500, but up there it says 230,000. Is that just a typo in the motion or is that,
But because that's the water utility, is that our capital one?
because
That's-
it's the exact same number as our municipal capital growth program funding, which I didn't know if that was just top of page 2 of our motions list. I was like, neat that they're the same number, but I wonder if they're supposed to be. But then when that slide came up. Okay.
Oh, it's the long-term debt in version 2 of the water utility.
And I suggest to the chair maybe that we just.
Yeah, well, I'll call 10-15 minute recess. We'll be back. Thank you. Thank you, and we are back. So I think we left off with a question from Councillor Butler, so I'm going to throw it back to Beth. So I'm not 100% sure if there's any more questions. I'm going to throw it out there exactly where we were. You were finished that part. And are there any more questions from council before Councillor Butler puts the motion on the floor?
So just before the break, we reviewed the amounts for both capital budgets, both.
I don't think I don't think your mic is on.
Mike? The switch on the, oh, right here. Green. Now you can hear me? Okay, sorry about that. I shut it off before we went on break, so. Yeah, I don't sing, so I'm not good with mics. So before we broke for 5 minutes, Councillor Butler had asked about the motion related to the water utility capital funding component. On the slide, there was a typo in the motion. It is correct. And we've checked for both the water utility and the town as well. So the motion is good as presented.
Councillor Butler, are you ready? Or-
Would you like me to give a little update on the ops plan prior to the?
You want to do that now, CAO?
And then all-
Okay,
and
I
then all of
wasn't
the
sure.
motions can come
Okay,
through. Yeah.
okay, then, excuse me.
Yeah.
CEO, can you update the council on the changes to the ops plan?
Thank you very much. So the document, I'm not going to represent the document. Excuse me. Again, the document is in your package for your review. It's now receiving final review, proofreading, and copy editing, which will all be completed prior to posting. The changes from the March 4th and 11th committees of the whole are as follows. A list of all grants to organizations has been added to pages 8 and 9. You'll notice that the community partnership program grants are not listed yet. Those are still being reviewed. Once they are completed, they will be added to that list as well. Financial trends and levied rates have been added to page 11. Additional financial information will be added to this section once the budget is approved. It will be substantially the same as what you saw today on your slides. We'll repurpose that information and put it directly into the document. A pilot project to address concerns with the impact of continuous crosswalk use at the intersections of Gaspro, Highland, and University, causing undue congestion on Main Street will be explored. Staff will bring information to council for further consideration. And that language has been added to the crosswalk evaluation project that's described on page 21. So that's as a result of your guys' feedback. RCMP FTEs have been added to page 28, and we've also added a status column on the capital investment plan on pages 31 to 35, providing the current state of those projects, and that information will be compiled and added to that column prior to publishing. And so those are all the substantial changes that have been made to the document. As I said, there's continuous kind of editing going on, but those are the substantive changes. So if there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Are there any questions by council to our CAO?
I have a couple, mostly for clarification purposes. I like when I see dollars because then I put in my head that there is something that is going to be spent on something. And there's one section on page 20 under parks maintenance that lists a bunch of things. It just says staff led. There's no dollars attached to that, but I can't see how those things can be done without a dollar value added to them. So I didn't know if that was just something I mean, every dollar should be put in, but like tree planting, the rock wall at Clock Park, electrical panels, I'm just wondering why there's no dollar attached to those types of things.
So that is allotted for in our budget. It'll be completed by our staff versus contracting out.
Okay.
So I think originally we had most of the dollars that were there were anticipated kind of contract services, but there is a blend of both. So we can take a look at adding a dollar value to that item.
And then I just had a second question with regards to the same thing, and I'm just trying to get to my page. I think it's 32, if I marked it correctly. I I just had a question about the Earnscliffe Avenue reconstruction. That number, 89,500, seems extremely low to me compared to other dollar amounts for things. Unless it's just in a very preliminary planning stage, which is why the dollar is so low. But I look at, I think it was how much money it would cost to put just something through the old burial ground, and it was more than half of that. So I just wondered if that number is correct.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Butler. I'm happy to provide a response. That amount that's on the budget for this year covers only the design professional services in order to get the project tender ready for our next fiscal year.
Thanks. Okay, I have a couple of questions. I'm gonna go through my slides here and I'm using my new iPad, so I might be slower than usual. HR needs, that was going to be done with our partners. With Kempel now hiring a new CAO, is that delayed or is that different staff?
It is not delayed. So we brought the interim CAO of Kentville up to speed, and we've just recently signed an MOU to divide costs on that project. And we actually issued the RFP for that project about a week ago. So it's there will likely be maybe a small delay with some of the leadership changes occurring in Kentville, but not a substantial one.
Thank you. My second one is on page 26. So other rec programming and the triad and recreation programming. I see we have older adult fitness, dance, music, etc. We identified teens and young adults as needing other things to do, but they aren't listed in there. Is it just, I'm assuming we're not forgetting about them. They're just not listed.
That's correct.
Thank you. Good answer. Short and sweet.
I love these short answers are great.
Parks and Rec on the review planning, Rachel Bedingfield, we've been talking about her coming in. So when will we see Rachel and hear the beginnings of that work?
Thanks for the question. So we're just finalizing a scope of work, and with some of the organizational transition, what you'll probably see is Glenn and Nick leading that work and less of my involvement. So within the next couple weeks.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. The mud dam, that's at the nature preserve, correct? Yeah. I wonder if we should write that in there because I bet you people forget. Often I do too. So that's at the nature reserve. It doesn't say where it is. So
Yeah, we can make that
just
change.
yeah, just that was it. Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
One more. In our package, it doesn't say when we will be coming back with updates. So it isn't like, it's our operational plan, but
Yeah.
do we have, like, so are we coming back in October, January, March with those updates? Is typically we put, or is it in there and I missed it? Because
It's not in the memo where it is, what we've written in the document itself around risk and reporting. Acknowledging risk, regular reporting to senior staff, council, and the public is important, so challenges and deviations are identified early. The primary conduit for reporting on ops plan will be the monthly CAO report to the committee of the whole. Additionally, many initiatives will come to council with their own decision points. And finally, a more detailed ops plan update will be provided to the committee of the whole twice a year.
twice a year. Okay, so
So
not
like-
identified yet. So
So likely sometime either right before or right after summer.
Okay.
And then again, before budget.
So will you have the whole, you obviously are gonna take the whole ops plan and put it as the back of your CAO, but you're just gonna highlight done.
Likely something like that. We actually have to sit down and go through the CAO report to determine exactly what the format's going to look like, but something like that, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anything else? Ron, do you have anything else to
No, just my supreme thanks to all staff for all of the work that's gone into creating not only the budget documents themselves, but also the work to design the various initiatives and programs that we're doing, take the feedback from the community, from council, and build it into a coherent package and go through all the various iterations, again, both in the budget and in the ops plan. It's been a tremendous amount of work from all the folks you see at the back of the room, plus more. So I can't thank you guys enough for that. And also the discussions and back and forth with council as we've developed these documents and these plans has been absolutely exceptional. I can't thank you folks enough for the way you've taken your job seriously, provided thoughtful feedback, and I think we've crafted something that we can all stand behind and be proud of.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. And we all council does appreciate it. All the feedback that we have given you and how you've incorporated it. So thank you so much to everybody involved in that. I know it was a lot of work. So with my over enthusiasm, are we ready to put the motion on the floor?
I am.
Okay, Councillor Butler, you're on.
Okay, I've been warming up my wispy baritone, so let's see how it goes. For RFD 012-2025, 2025-26 Budget and Operations Plan Final, I move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to Council for decision. That Council approve the 2025-26 Town Operating Budget, 5-year Capital Investment Plan, and the Water Utility Operating and Capital Budget, including the following details. Town operating budget with revenue and expenditures in the amount of $16,388,511. Residential tax rate of $1.4655 per $100 of assessment applied to taxable residential and resource assessments. Commercial tax rate of $3.5655 per $100 of assessment applied to taxable commercial assessments. Taxes to be billed by way of interim tax bill issued in April, due May 30th, 2025, and final tax bill issued in August, due October 1st, 2025. Interest in overdue amounts to be charged at a rate of 1.00% per month, compounded. Town capital budget with year one totaling capital reserve funding of $2,887,025, operating reserve funding of $215,800, long-term debt funding of $1,902,860, active transportation grant funding of $620,800, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, ICIP, funding of $3,483,200, and other grant funding of $105,400. Water utility operating budget with operating reserves of $1,594,200. Operating expenditures of $712,000. And I was doing so well. Operating expenditures of $1,712,020. Non-operating revenues of $36,000 and non-operating expenditures of $101,780. Water utility capital budget totaling $1,746,600, including capital reserve funding of $418,300, municipal capital growth program funding of $514,500, capital from operating reserves funding of $6,250, growth and renewal for infrastructure development funding of $293,050, and long-term debt funding of $514,500. Fire protection area rate pursuant to Section 80 of the Municipal Government Act at $0.0562 per $100 of assessment. Business development area rate pursuant to Section 56 of the Municipal Government Act of $0.23 per $100 of commercial assessment. Sewer fees my favorite. Sewer usage rate of $7.08 per 1,000 gallons of water used by customer. Flat rate fee of $135.70 per quarter. Minimum quarterly charge for any metered customer, $29.85. Sewer connection fee of $6,500. Water connection fee of $6,500. Sewer and water connection fee of $6,500. Low-income property tax exemption. Income threshold to qualify a maximum of $46,500. Maximum tax exemption of $1,065. Grants to organizations under general government community development not part of strategic and community partnership policy. Acadia Scholar bursaries, $11,000. Acadia University events hosting contribution of $30,000. Summer camps, $15,000. Athletics, $35,000.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mayor McKay. Are there any questions for the motion? We vote on the motion? Yeah, that was funny. So I don't see any questions. So all in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. All right, are we moving on, Councillor Butler?
I can,
Yeah,
yep,
okay.
now that I'm warmed up. I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to Council for decision. That Council approve the 2025-2026 Town Operational Plan, permitting staff to add financial details as approved in the 2025-26 operating and capital budgets.
Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Elliott, thank you. Are there any questions before the motion? We vote on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. Move on.
I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to Council for decision, that Council approve the hiring of a full-time permanent community recreation programmer as part of the 2025-2026 budget.
Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Van Niekerk. Are there any questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried unanimously also.
I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to Council for decision, that Council approve the hiring of a full-time permanent administrative assistant in the office of the CAO as part of the 2025-2026 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, and a seconder, Councillor Williams. And are there any questions on the motion? We'll vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried unanimously.
I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to Council for decision, that Council approve a $40,000 one-time capital grant contribution to the Wolfville Legion in support of facility upgrades as part of the 2025-2026 budget.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Elliott, are there any questions on the motion? No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried unanimously.
And I move that Committee of the Whole forward the following a $2,500 one-time operational grant contribution to Horton High School franchise to support the Duke of Edinburgh Experiences Canada Exchange as part of the 2025-26 budget.
Can I have Councillor Williams, thank you for seconding that. Are there any questions on that motion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And that is also carried unanimously. All right, you're off the hook for a little while there, Councillor Butler. Well done. That's a lot of reading.
I liked it.
Not on, you're still sitting there, so.
I am. So the municipal fee.
Karen McCabe?
Thanks. Just one question. Are these standard as are we on par with our other municipalities? Or is this a fairly standard fees policy?
We haven't changed the number of years.
Yeah.
Aside from student usage consumption rate.
Yeah.
There's some, I know last year at the budget, when it was presented, when I came in kind of midstream or mid-stride of it, there was an anticipation that we would actually look at it as a leadership team and dive into it.
Mm.
We did not do that for
Okay.
this current fiscal year. The plan, of course, will be to go forward and hopefully do it in 25-26. I think given the change in the leadership as well as the latest of the budget being approved,
Mm.
and then additional work with the year end, which is something that finance and capacity to do at that time.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? All right. Am I looking at you to put the last motion
I
on there?
will if
Keep
you- I
rolling?
mean,
Okay, I
yeah.
will let you keep rolling.
For RFD 013-2025 municipal fees policy, I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council approve the municipal fees policy 140-015 as attached to RFD 013-2025 as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Williams, thank you. Is there any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you. There we go. Can take a breather, Councillor Butler. We are finished with the staff reports and we are moving on to public input. Do I see anybody here that would like to come up? And thank you. And for people watching, please state your name and your address.
Yes.
And as you know, CA Horn will give you a hand wave at the limit of 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Andrea Lynn and I live at 74 Sherwood Drive in Wolfville. I'm just going to recap why I've been here since September or October sometime. The first being that a group of us were very concerned about the 100% digital elections that you all went through and the validity of those. Then I think we were concerned with the speed at which the provincial election came into effect. And then concerns with what the premier of the province was asking of the councils. I've been involved in those questions. And now we have a third election upon us. And I think we have to admit that the speed of it is also there. And we have Houston problems. We all know we have Houston problems. So I'm assuming we're going to have carnage problems too. I call them that because that's what we're dealing with. I think part of the problem is right here. All of our municipalities are disconnected, interfered with, and infiltrated. You can call me a conspiracy theorist, which I'm sure you do behind my back. But we need to get back to what councils are. They use taxpayers' money to do the projects within budget. There isn't money slipping in from somewhere else that's doing their own thing, and you have to money launder in here. Sorry, I'm saying, I say what I think, and I have to say this. We have a federation of Canadian municipalities, which is probably also infiltrated. Probably the Nova Scotia one is too, but I'd like to see you get it back, and I'd like to see you get yourselves out of the Partners for Climate Protection. You're 5 levels into it. I think Hants West is 3 levels into it. You're steeped in it. You probably don't know what council is anymore. Maybe Wendy can remember. I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to hand this to only the councilors in this council, not to the staff, because you are from elsewhere. That's the end. All of this. This is happening in Canada, and it can happen here. There is a liquid group from Kickly group. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone online for public input? No, that concludes our public input. Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. It is 10:22 and we are adjourned this special